for their sin, for their blackmail, for their blasphemy, abomination, immorality. Hallelujah. Kutawaka. There is a storm coming.
A disaster, is a tsunami.
In the past 24 hours, 793 people have died. It's not only Italy's deadliest day, but the deadliest day since the outbreak began. Scenes like this could become our new reality, warns Dr. Michael Ryan of the World Health Organization.
This is not normal. This isn't just a bad flu season. These are health systems that are collapsing under the pressure of too many cases.
The cases that don't make it end up here. With the morgue overflowing, bodies are stored in this chapel. Every person died alone, without family or friends. Army trucks carry them away to a local cemetery to be buried quickly before more bodies arrive.
Healthcare systems everywhere have been overwhelmed with coronavirus patients.
We can't cope with a big spike. We just can't. We're planning for many more patients, so all our theatres to be full of COVID patients and possibly beyond. It is, none of us have ever seen anything like this.
We have a full ICU. We have every patient in here on a ventilator. Everybody has coronavirus.
The hospitals are full and the truly sick keep on arriving. The only sound is the urgent movement of the medical teams and the machines keeping the patients alive.
Healthcare systems everywhere have been overwhelmed with coronavirus patients.
City officials have called for a 2-week stay-at-home order as coronavirus cases continue to overwhelm hospitals there.
Our hospitals are overwhelmed. We have 7 hospitals that are at maximum capacity right now.
Hospitals in Florida are overwhelmed with coronavirus patients. Intensive care units at more than 40 hospitals are at full capacity.
We had our 24-bed COVID floor. It was going to be all we needed. And then this came. And then we had to open up a second floor and the third floor. And now we're into a fourth and fifth floor. And we don't see it getting any better.
Drive-through testing centers in Florida have also been overwhelmed. There are reports that some have had to turn people away.
The surge in cases is flooding hospitals in hotspots like Phoenix.
We're at over 100% capacity, if that's possible. But every place there's a potential bed, we have a person.
This is the scene outside my job right now.
This was the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Monday. A nurse from NYU Langone Hospital sent us this video. He told us there were 9 ambulances, all backed up, trying to get patients into the emergency room entrance.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now. He took me to India. I see the Lord took me into a hospital in India. There's a very big distress there.
This is an ABC News.
But perhaps there is no nation on earth with a bigger crisis than India. They are on track to overtake the U.S. as the nation with the most cases worldwide.
Singh Khan used to speed through India's capital to save the living. Today, the medic races to collect the dead, weaving through Delhi's clogged streets, bodies swathed in white, ready for cremation, in a race to slow the spread of a disease coursing through India's veins. It now has the world's fastest growing rate of infection and death. Today, 2 more COVID-19 casualties are added to the more than 100,000 deaths. And more heartbroken families must mourn and grieve and bid farewell to their loved ones. This is what passes for an ordinary day as India gets hit by a second wave far more vicious than the first, preying on the most vulnerable. Today, Mohsin had to pick up the body of a 3-year-old girl.
My heart breaks. I have seen so many bodies.
It's beyond his remit. It's the grimmest of jobs, exacting a terrible toll. The bodies keep piling up. India seeing nearly 2.5 million new cases just this past month. We were in a New Delhi hospital this past June. Doctors in full PPE. Patients hooked up to ventilators.
These are the sickest of the lot.
The beeping in ICU wards, the soundtrack to a crisis steadily getting worse.
He's not waking up.
India's cases were starting to climb.
This situation is unlike anything which we have seen ever before. We are really struggling and we are trying that we can deliver our best. But yes, it's really tough.
The situation wearing on the doctors. Today, medical professionals in the country are sounding the alarm. India is now second only to the United States in having the most COVID cases, topping 5 million.
In most of the big cities, we are reaching a saturation point where most of the hospitals are choked to capacity. There is a scarcity of ventilators.
Maharashtra, being the worst hit state in the country, has crossed the 1 lakh mark. And Mumbai, capital of Maharashtra, remains worst hit. 99% ICU beds are occupied. Government officials said hospitals have been instructed to strictly adhere to admission and discharge guidelines and only admit severely symptomatic patients to allow beds for critical patients.
India has become the second worst hit country by the coronavirus pandemic in the world. With the official data released by the Indian Health Ministry, the country has surpassed Brazil in total number of COVID-19 infections. The country has also recorded its highest COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. This is also the highest one-day surge recorded anywhere in the world. 90,800 people have been tested positive for the lethal virus in the last 24 hours. The death toll climbed to over 71,600 after more than 1,000 people lost their lives to COVID-19.
With a record 90,802 new confirmed cases Monday, India has now surpassed Brazil. It stands as the second worst affected country in the world. Some 4.2 million people now have coronavirus in India.
Coming in, India has reported over 90,000 cases of coronavirus in the last 24 hours for a second day. This is the second day that we have crossed 90,000 cases, and we are now 4.2 million cases of coronavirus. You can see 42,4,613 cases of coronavirus being reported in India, and we have surpassed Brazil. We are the second worst affected nation when it comes to coronavirus right now. Remember, the United States is the worst affected. India is now number 2 there, and Brazil is at number 3 position.
India has now overtaken Brazil as the second worst hit country in the world with the number of cases. We now stand at 4.19 million cases as opposed to Brazil's 4.12. On Sunday, our total new cases came to more than 90,000 cases in a single day, which is the highest caseload of any given country.
Health authorities in India say the country has now exceeded 4 million coronavirus cases. Nearly 2 million new infections were recorded last month alone. India has the third highest total worldwide, behind the U.S. and Brazil.
India has become the third country in the world that has 4 million coronavirus infections.
Now, India, one of the worst coronavirus hit countries in the world, has crossed the grim 4 million mark in terms of COVID cases.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now. He took me to India. I see the Lord took me into a hospital in India. There's a very big distress there.
After lapses at Cooper Hospital and Nair Hospital, now another hospital run by the civic body BMC is in the news for all the wrong reasons. A video from a hospital in Sion has gone viral on social media. What it shows is how COVID patients are being treated in the same ward where lying only few inches away from them are dead bodies. Yes, these are dead corpses on the bed. Even as nurses are walking up and down past these corpses, the ward checking up on COVID patients.
A shocker from Mumbai. A video posted on Twitter by BJP MLA Nitesh Rane shows coronavirus patients in a hospital ward lying next to corpses wrapped in body bags. This horrifying clip is from Sion Hospital, which is run by the city's municipal corporation. At least 7 bodies are seen in the ward as patients are being treated in adjoining beds. Some patients have family members attending to them, apparently ignoring bodies right behind them.
Wards. Multiple patients sharing a single bed. Bodies lying in wards packed with patients. Wards used as morgue to store bodies. Mumbai's Sion Hospital's emergency wards are bursting at their seam with these horrifying images. Equally shocking video has come to light from another BMC-run KEM hospital in Mumbai's Parel area. Wards of the KEM hospital is packed with patients and their relatives. Patients and their kin lying on the floor as no bed is available. Many are without masks, ignoring any semblance of social distancing.
The capacity of the mortuary is 45 dead bodies at LNJP, but with the increase in COVID-19 deaths, the mortuary was not able to handle the situation. In 1 week, 108 dead bodies were in LNJP, clammed one over the other. Let's go across to Sherin, who's joining us with more details. Well, till this point in time, we've played out visuals coming in from Mumbai and the apathy, as far as the handling of the dead bodies is concerned. But now these visuals coming in from LNJP is shocking. Some dead bodies, we're being told, were thrown in the passage.
Well, that is right. The visuals are shocking to say the least, because the capacity of the LNJP mortuary is only 45 dead bodies at a time. But we are seeing that there were, in fact, in last 1 week, there were more than 100 dead bodies that were at the mortuary, and because of which, one after the other, it was getting difficult for the LNJP mortuary, for the authorities to deal with the situation. Now we know that there was, in fact, a number of, on one rack itself, there were 2 bodies that were kept, and there were around 28 bodies that was thrown at the passage, because there was no space at all to keep these bodies at the rack. There were few bodies that were around 80 of them were kept on the rack, because there are around 40 racks are there. So in each rack, Swati, there were 2 dead bodies. Accordingly, there were 80 dead bodies that were kept there, and the other, the rest of them were in fact left on the passage.
In a disturbing video that emerged on Tuesday, 8 bodies of coronavirus victims were wrapped in plastic and dumped into a common pit in Karnataka's Ballari district. Officials, while maintaining that the bodies were wrapped in plastic as per rules, said that the inhumane treatment will be probed. Chief Minister B.S. Yadurappa termed the behavior of the staff inhuman and painful.
The disturbing visuals that have gone viral on social media. You can see shots on our screens at the moment of a group of men in hazmat suits dumping body bags into a huge pit. What really is going on?
Well, the DC of Ballari, SS Nakul, has confirmed that this, in fact, was the burial of 8 people who had died of COVID-19. Now, of course, very distressing, because many times family members cannot access the bodies of those who have died and cannot perform the funeral rites as per their wishes. But the DC confirming this was, in fact, disrespectful, as he put it, something he deeply regrets, the disrespectful handling of the bodies. This video has been widely shared, actually, and of course it's given a chance to the opposition in the state. The Janata Dal Secular, the Congress's D.K. Shiv Kumar have tweeted criticizing the BJP government's handling of the entire COVID situation, using this as an example, in fact. The deeply distressing visuals, really. The remains of 8 people who died of COVID in Ballari district in Karnataka being tossed into a pit. The field team.
But in a shocking case, a COVID victim has been abandoned outside a hospital in Bhopal on Monday night. It isn't clear from these visuals whether the patient was dead or alive at the time that he was abandoned. A Discom employee, he had been admitted with a kidney ailment. He then developed breathing trouble and was suspected to have pneumonia. He was diagnosed with corona on Monday evening. The hospital administration, it seems, was keen to shift him to a dedicated COVID facility. After he took a turn for the worse, the ambulance driver allegedly abandoned him outside the hospital on a pavement. A magisterial probe has now been.
There's going to be a big distress that is going to come, a big disease. Distress of disease is coming. That distress will be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet earth, will throb on this planet earth.
In Israel, there have been protests in Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem against the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Police used water cannon in West Jerusalem to try to disperse the crowds. Israel reimposed restrictions after a surge in cases last week, something that's angered demonstrators. There have been protests for weeks over the economic situation and lockdown measures. There were also chants demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu resign.
Thousands of Israelis protested in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem against what they see as a bungled government response to the coronavirus crisis. Israeli police fired water cannons to disperse demonstrators gathered outside his Jerusalem residence.
Violent clashes have broken out between protesters and police as hundreds illegally rallied against Melbourne's lockdown laws. The force was ready as tensions quickly rose amongst the group, branded selfish by the Premier. Mark Santomartino was there.
Brawling with police in the name of freedom. Demonstrators were picked off one by one to rounds of applause. Handcuffed but far from gagged, their hatred for lockdown was laid bare.
Is this the future you want for us?
Moving early on the loudest only angered the growing mob, ditching masks and social distancing to link arms and stare down police reinforcements.
The streets of Spain's capital, Madrid, resound with the honk of car horns as thousands rally in the city. Protesters are calling for Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and his deputy to resign over their handling of the coronavirus crisis.
Residents of this great state are smart enough, and more important, have the right to decide their own comfort level with any and all pathogens and viruses.
If they want my money, then let me work.
Hurling rocks, flares and insults at the government, protesters gathered for a second night across the Serbian capital, Belgrade. Security forces massed outside Parliament, keen to avoid a repeat of Tuesday's chaos, when some protesters managed to storm the building. But the tensions remained high, with more tear gas from police, some in the crowd intent on forcing their way inside again. Protesters blame President Alexander Vučić for a sudden spike in coronavirus deaths and infections after he'd lifted a strict lockdown just weeks before last month's elections.
Fireworks exploded in the streets and fires raged while armed police tried to disperse groups of protesters congregating in Villeneuve-le-Garenne.
There's going to be a big distress that is going to come, a big disease. Distress of disease is coming. That distress will be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
This year, thousands used the national holiday to protest against the government. Argentina's government imposed a lockdown in March to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The lockdown has had a dramatic impact on the economy.
I'm protesting because they're violating our human rights.
How are they violating your human rights?
By locking me down, by forcing a vaccine.
Angry at the government's restrictions to contain the coronavirus, protesters in Senegal's second largest city burned an ambulance and health center meant to protect them from the outbreak. On Friday, President Macky Sall announced an extension of the state of emergency, including a curfew until the end of June. That decision led to demonstrations throughout the country. Looming is a possible food and economic crisis, putting people on edge.
blessed people, the Lord Jehovah has spoken with me this past night. Jehovah Elohim, Jehovah Adonai, Jehovah Bara, the mighty God of Israel, blessed people, has spoken with me this past night. And in that conversation, the Lord has spoken about the continued judgment of the Lord that's upon the face of the earth. And the Lord is talking about the escalation of the judgment of the Lord, his judgment that is upon the face of the earth, the judgments of his prophet, the judgments of the mightiest prophets of the Lord who are walking the face of the earth. And the Lord has spoken about the escalation of that judgment, the continuation of that judgment. And in this past night, he spoke to me about children going back to school. And that when they go back to school, then he showed me these children who are running, playing and running together in the field in school. And he said, some of them will be infected with the coronavirus and they will transmit it to all the others in school. So that can tell you that the Lord is angry. And now I see a lot of children playing in the school ground, running in the field together in a group. And then the Lord said some of them will be infected and they will transmit to all of them in the schools.
This is CNN Breaking News.
School has just started. We're pretty much in some places in just the first week, and we are now hearing that in a Mississippi school district, the Corinth School District, now reporting that there have been several people who have tested positive for the coronavirus, and that has caused 100 students to have to be quarantined because of those positive tests.
The Lake County Health Department is telling us 36 Lake Zurich high school students have tested positive for COVID-19. Some students began feeling sick even during that first day of camp, and by Tuesday, the school's camps were shut down after being notified about several student athletes who tested positive.
St. Dominic High School has suspended all student activities through August 9th because of this outbreak. They sent out a letter confirming that 19 students have tested positive for COVID-19 and also 2 additional people who do not attend the school.
Dès lundi. Starting Monday and until further notice, nurseries, primary and secondary schools, high schools, and universities will be closed.
This is an ABC News special report.
We're going to have the schools remain closed for the rest of the year.
Across the world, schools have been closed for weeks and even months on end. Making matters worse, no one actually knows for sure when they'll be able to reopen, as the coronavirus pandemic shows no sign of abating anytime soon.
Italy's government has closed all schools in the country.
This morning, it's class dismissed at UNC Chapel Hill. Following a weekend of packed parties and growing COVID outbreaks, the university is reversing course, canceling all in-person classes just 1 week into the fall semester.
Seeing the COVID-19 positivity rate rise from 2.8% to 13.6% at Campus Health over the past week is very concerning.
Well, there are reports, Annalise, this morning that parents have been advised to go and pick up their students, their children from the school in Dundas in Sydney's West after 2 students, Year 10 students, tested positive for COVID-19.
That distress would be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced this morning that he has tested positive for the coronavirus.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro says he has tested positive for coronavirus.
Prince Charles has tested positive for coronavirus.
Bolivia's interim president Janine Áñez has also tested positive for the novel coronavirus.
Russia's Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin has been tested positive for the deadly disease.
50 crew members aboard France's flagship aircraft carrier have tested positive for the coronavirus.
U.S. soldiers tested positive. Equality Minister Arim Montero has tested positive. 212 prisoners have come out positive.
This morning, the nightmare at sea turning into a protest on the open ocean.
Send us home! Send us home!
The U.S. Coast Guard says at least 54,000 crew members remain aboard 85 ships in U.S. waters, but it's reported more than 100,000 crew members around the globe have been given no firm details on when they can disembark.
An extraordinary scene today as American sailors were rescued off their own ship. As the Navy announced, at least 93 crew members of the USS Theodore Roosevelt tested positive for the coronavirus, with hundreds of results still pending. The Secretary of the Navy said about a quarter of the 4,000 crew members have been tested so far.
The number of cases of coronavirus among the some 4,000 on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt had steadily grown over several days as it lay docked in Guam. The cramped, dense living conditions, a perfect viral incubator. And that led to this impassioned plea from the aircraft carrier's captain on Monday. We are not at war. Sailors do not need to die. If we do not act now, we are failing to properly take care of our most trusted asset, our sailors.
More than 6 million coronavirus cases in the United States. That's according to Johns Hopkins University.
Cases of the novel coronavirus in the United States topped 6 million on Sunday, as many states in the Midwest reported increasing infections, according to a Reuters tally. Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota have recently reported record one-day increases in new cases, while Montana and Idaho are seeing record numbers of currently hospitalized COVID-19 patients.
In just 3 weeks, the U.S. has added 1 million new COVID-19 infections, bringing its total number of cases to over 6 million. It remains the country hit hardest by the health crisis, accounting for almost a quarter of the world's total.
That distress would be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
CBS News Special Report. I'm Anthony Mason in New York, where stocks on Wall Street plummeted again this morning because of coronavirus concerns. The Dow Jones Industrials fell more than 9% right after the opening bell. As you can see, down 9.71%, almost 10%, which means trading was automatically stopped for 15 minutes.
The coronavirus pandemic will cause the worst global economic fallout since the Great Depression almost a century ago. That was the warning today from the head of the International Monetary Fund.
This is CNN Breaking.
The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a major stock market sell-off, and today we saw history and high anxiety for investors here in the U.S. The Dow Jones plunged more than 2,000 points. That is how the Dow Jones ended the day. It is the biggest drop in a single day ever. So you're witnessing history being made here.
We'll be watching the opening of the North American markets this morning. Yesterday, a beating after fears that COVID-19 is going to clobber the global economy. The closing bell on Wall Street yesterday, well, It certainly sounded more like an alarm. Investors were taking their money and running for the hills. The Dow plunged more than 1,000 points in a single day for only the third time in its history.
Eurozone's two biggest economies are falling into historic recession. Germany, Europe's main engine of growth, is now facing the steepest decline in decades.
This is the largest decline in Germany since the start of our quarterly measures in 1970, and twice as large as during the financial crisis in the first quarter of 2009.
France's central bank says the country enters recession with 6% drop in the first quarter.
I do not think I've hidden from the French people that this economic crisis can only be compared to the 1929 crisis in terms of severity, its global nature, and its duration.
You can see that certainly in the firms that are getting the worst of the hit today. Boeing isn't going to be able to sell as many planes because people aren't going to fly as much. Apple's lost like more than $200 billion in value since its last peak. And in that, we've seen, not just today, but a pretty ugly week. I mean, the Dow was down 3,200 points this week. These are steep losses.
Data releases each day are underscoring the economic havoc wreaked on Britain and the world economy by the coronavirus lockdown. Businesses have shut, millions of workers have lost their jobs and had their wages cut, and savers and pensioners have watched their money diminish as stock markets tanked. Central banks responded by printing money and cutting interest rates to record lows.
The longer the lockdown goes on, the more chance there is of lasting damage to the economy, what economists call a scarring. And this is because quite a lot of businesses will become insolvent.
Car rental company Hertz declared bankruptcy, and your favorite childhood restaurant, Chuck E. Cheese, also went under. And economists say this is only the tip of the iceberg. Despite billions of dollars spent in government support and loans, legal scholars worry that bankruptcy courts will soon be overloaded, resulting in delays as many cash-strapped business owners will be forced to shut down permanently. There have been over 26,160 total restaurant closures, an increase of 2,179 since June 15th. That's according to data from Yelp. About 60% are permanently closed, with bars being especially hit hard. The retail industry also endured 26,119 total business closures, of which 48% were permanent. Beauty and spas, bars and nightlife, and fitness centers are also suffering the blow.
The airline industry has taken a major hit during this pandemic.
4 months into the global pandemic, the coronavirus has the nation's major airlines bleeding cash. Just a couple of months ago, airlines saw passenger levels drop off a cliff, down 95%.
As long as we see COVID-19 continue to spread around the country and we don't see a break in the infection levels, we're going to see real limited numbers in terms of people taking flights.
United Airlines now says it's losing $25 million a day. Delta says its daily cash burn rate hit $27 million a day in late June, down from $100 million a day in March.
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment. Now there's no equipment. The doctors are running up and down. Well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "You don't have equipment."
Where are the ventilators? Where are the gowns? Where's the PPEs? Where are the masks? Where are they? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000? You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
This is Janet Shamlian in Houston, where a dire situation is unfolding. A surge of COVID patients has some hospitals here scrambling to find beds in other Texas cities. New infections in Texas soared to an all-time high of 8,076 cases today. More than 6,900 are hospitalized with the virus.
The numbers speak for themselves. I'm very concerned and I'm not satisfied with what's going on because we're going in the wrong direction.
The World Health Organization is warning of a global shortage of coronavirus protective equipment, including masks and respirators that health workers use when treating infectious patients.
In California, there's a dwindling supply of protective equipment.
They're not protecting us. They're not saving our lives.
This California nurse says she's wearing donated gear and has to wipe down her gown between patients.
Medical staff have released video clips of each other cutting up plastic rubbish bags to use as protective clothing. As many as 15,000 of their colleagues are too ill to work or are self-isolating.
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment now. There's no equipment. The doctors are running up and down. Well, next one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment."
6 of the nation's largest medical distributors warned raw material for PPE is now in a really bad position worldwide. Material for gowns is unavailable at any price, and continuing to supply protective equipment is not sustainable. Supply shortages in Sacramento forced 5 COVID testing sites to close.
World powers that are armed for the globe's biggest wars are now fighting for basic protective gear. France is reported to have seized masks meant to be shipped to Spain and Italy. And the U.S. is accused of diverting gear intended for the German police. An estimated 3.5 billion masks are needed by the American healthcare system to fight this outbreak, and there are not enough. And frontline workers risk being infected as doctors and patients are asked to reuse what they have.
Now, due to sudden jumps in numbers, states are facing an impending shortage of intensive care unit hospital beds.
Healthcare workers around the world are asking for help. They're in desperate need of more PPE, also known as personal protective equipment. Stocks of the critical gear are disappearing during the coronavirus pandemic. Doctors say they are rationing gloves, reusing masks, and raiding hardware stores.
Long lines for life's most vital element. Oxygen is in short supply for COVID-19 patients who are struggling to breathe.
Tonight, Arizona is down to the lowest number of available ICU beds since the crisis began. And in California, where infections are surging, medical workers are sounding the alarm about a shortage of protective equipment.
There will be a disease emergency. The stress of disease is coming. There will be a disease emergency.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with news about the new coronavirus outbreak. The World Health Organization has now declared it an international public health emergency.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern.
I am officially declaring a national emergency.
All 54 states, territories, and the District of Columbia have declared a state of emergency.
The novel coronavirus outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern.
The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared Saturday a state of emergency for the next 15 days.
Of the 3 tiers in relation to the response level, alert, serious and emergency, the level had been raised to serious. Now, today, I'd like to announce that we are going to escalate it to the highest level, that is emergency.
The Italian government declared a state of emergency.
In neighboring France, a state of health emergency has been declared in the last 24 hours.
Switzerland's Federal Council has declared a state of emergency until the 19th of April.
Mexico's deputy health minister declared a national public health emergency.
There will be a disease emergency. The stress of disease is coming. There will be a disease emergency.
Declaring a state of public health emergency throughout the Philippines.
Declaring a state of public emergency throughout the Gambia.
Ethiopia has declared a state of emergency in response to the coronavirus pandemic.
I, Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, declare that a state of public emergency exists in the whole of the Republic of Sierra Leone.
I have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
A public health emergency.
A declaration of emergency.
State of emergency.
And to declare a state of emergency for our state.
Advance a proclamation of a state of emergency in the state of California.
I have officially done a declaration of emergency.
Today I'm declaring a state of emergency in Massachusetts.
That it is necessary to declare a state of public emergency.
I have signed and issuing a declaration of emergency.
Well, the next one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this and they will take a little and put on the culture. We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this and they will take a little and put on the culture."
Scientists racing to find a vaccine.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
So what we're looking at are cells which have been grown in culture.
Biology will attempt to grow novel coronavirus in human cell lines, which will enable in vitro testing of potential drugs and vaccines against COVID-19. The research team will use iStem's human lung epithelial cell culture system, provided as part of its anti-COVID screening platform, to understand the molecular and pathological characteristics of the virus, with a view of establishing a rational basis to test potential drugs in vitro.
Well, the next one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this and they will take a little and put on the culture. We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this and they will take a little and put on the culture."
The Lord Jehovah Elohim, the creator of all the universe, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of all men. Every man you see walking around here, around on the earth here, he created. He spoke with me about the glorious coming of the Messiah and the current ongoing situation on the earth, the wrath of God, the judgment of God that I spoke December 1, the year 2015, the prophecy that brought the coronavirus, the most unbearable moment that this generation has encountered. And so the Lord says that this judgment will continue. This judgment of the Lord will continue. And so the coronavirus is still going to ravage and devastate this generation. I have seen the coronavirus gets worse. So the Lord is crying out to this generation. He's really pleading with this generation. Prepare the way. Repent. The Messiah is coming.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Now to another grim milestone. The world surpassing 1 million deaths from the coronavirus.
This is what COVID has done to us, pocketing our lands and fields with mass graves. From Sao Paulo, Brazil, to deep in the Amazon, to even just a few months ago, the Empire City, New York. The confirmed COVID-19 death toll has now surpassed 1 million, according to the Johns Hopkins count. And that, health officials caution, is likely an undercount, since many countries keep poor records and test little. COVID has been 2020's world war, but unlike on the battlefield, many of its victims died alone, surrounded by plastic.
The number of people worldwide who've died from coronavirus-related deaths has topped 1 million. And even with that figure, the true number of cases is likely to be higher still because of the number of cases that go undetected. These are the latest figures from the Johns Hopkins University tracker. You can see that figure's already soared beyond the 1 million mark within the past couple of hours. The number of recorded infections is now more than 33 million. The US, Brazil and India make up more than 50% of those cases, and those three countries also account for nearly half of all global deaths.
Our world has reached an agonizing milestone, the loss of 1 million lives from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a mind-numbing figure. Yet we must never lose sight of each and every individual life. They were fathers and mothers, wives and husbands, brothers and sisters, friends and colleagues. The pain has been multiplied by the savageness of this disease.
The world passed a grim milestone on Tuesday of more than 1 million people who have died from the novel coronavirus since the first reported case in China in January. More than 33 million people have been infected by COVID-19 across more than 210 countries and territories, according to a Reuters tally. Deaths from coronavirus-related illnesses have doubled from 500,000 in just 3 months, led by fatalities in the United States, Brazil and India. Those countries account for nearly half of all COVID-19 deaths globally, with the Latin American region alone responsible for more than a third of them. More than 5,400 people are dying around the world every 24 hours, according to a Reuters calculation. In the time it takes to watch a 90-minute soccer match, 340 people die on average. India is the latest epicenter of the pandemic globally. The high number of deaths has also led to changes in burial rites around the world, with morgues and funeral homes overwhelmed. From Bolivia to Indonesia, authorities and volunteers have had to work overtime to dig new graves and locate new burial sites.
Cases of the novel coronavirus in the United States topped 6 million on Sunday, as many states in the Midwest reported increasing infections, according to a Reuters tally. Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota have recently reported record one-day increases in new cases, while Montana and Idaho are seeing record numbers of currently hospitalized COVID-19 patients.
Today, 16th of September 2020, is the day of history.
Leo hii tarehe 16 Septemba mwaka 2020 ni siku ya kihistoria.
As I was asleep in the night,
Nilipokuwa nimelala usiku,
then all of a sudden I saw the visions of the Lord.
kisha ghafla bunbu nikayaona maono ya Bwana.
And then I saw from afar
Halafu nikaona kutoka mbali
the Lord Most High flying very far, too high,
Bwana aliye juu sana akipaa sana juu
like an eagle.
kama tai.
And then after that,
Halafu baada ya
he
hiyo
spoke to me about the judgment of the USA, the United States of America.
akazungumza pamoja nami kuhusu hukumu ya Marekani, majimbo ya umoja Marekani.
Then in that dream,
Halafu katika ndoto hiyo
I saw that the USA was judged.
niliona ya kwamba Marekani ilihukumiwa.
The White House.
Kule White House.
I saw the great eagle. He struck the White House in the USA.
Spoke with me about the judgment of God
Halafu akazungumza pamoja nami kuhusu hukumu ya Mungu
that is coming to the USA, United States of America.
ambayo inakuja Marekani kwa majimbo ya umoja Marekani.
Then I pronounced it.
Halafu nikaitangaza.
Then all of a sudden I saw he struck America.
Halafu ghafla binvu nikamwona akagonga Marekani.
And the White House was affected.
Na ikulu ya White House likaathirika.
I have warned the United States of America.
Nimeonya majimbo ya umoja Marekani.
The Lord has instructed me to strike you with the wrath of God.
Bwana ameniagiza ni wagonge na ghadhabu ya Mungu.
Repent.
Tubuni.
This is an ABC News special report.
Breaking news. The President and First Lady have tested positive for the coronavirus. This coming after one of the President's closest advisors tested positive.
There is a level of panic inside the White House and frankly right now across the country. The concern now is going to be tracking down who else has been in close contact with the president that will need to be quarantined. That could range from the White House press secretary to his Secret Service detail to other senior advisors. Remember, he was just on the stage with Joe Biden at that debate. We know that everyone who comes in close contact with the president is tested for COVID-19, but the reality here is that has not stopped the virus from entering the White House complex, which is one of the most secure buildings in this country.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Stunning news. The President of the United States now confirming to the world that he and the First Lady of the United States have both tested positive for the coronavirus and they will quarantine. The president tweeting out just moments ago here in the United States, 12:54 a.m., said tonight that Flotus and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. Again, the President of the United States confirming via Twitter that he is now tested positive for COVID-19 and the First Lady as well. We have been on the air this evening here on CNN since about 9:45 reporting about the President. The President confirming the news that was first reported by Bloomberg Network that the President of the United States had come in contact with Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks, who is his one of his top aides, closest aides, testing positive for coronavirus. After she tested positive, the President and the First Lady got their tests and they were awaiting it. The President gave an interview to Fox News tonight explaining that to Fox News viewers that he was awaiting test results, he and the First Lady, and that they would quarantine.
This is an NBC News special report.
The President of the United States and the First Lady have both tested positive for the coronavirus. Tonight, Flotus and I, First Lady of the United States, and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. The president's age, of course, puts him in one of those high-risk groups.
This is a Fox News alert. I'm Ashley Strohmeyer live from New York. President Trump just tweeted moments ago that he and the First Lady have tested positive for the coronavirus. It follows news that top aide Hope Hicks, who traveled with the president multiple times this week, had tested positive. This includes aboard Marine One, the presidential helicopter, and on Air Force One to a rally in Minnesota Wednesday, and then aboard Air Force One to Tuesday night's first presidential debate in Cleveland. Hicks is said to be quarantining at home and is reportedly experiencing symptoms. Multiple White House staffers have tested positive for the virus in the past. This includes Katie Miller, Vice President Mike Pence's press secretary, the National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and one of the president's personal valets.
Donald Trump has said he and his wife Melania have coronavirus and have begun a period of quarantine. They were both tested after one of Mr. Trump's most senior advisors, Hope Hicks, found out that she had the virus. The White House doctor has said both the president and the First Lady are well and that Mr. Trump will continue to carry out his duties while he self-isolates. President Trump confirmed the news on Twitter, saying that he and the First Lady will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately and that they will get through this together.
And welcome. Lots going on tonight. That breaking news. President Trump has tested positive for coronavirus. He tweeted just about 6 minutes ago the following. I'll read you directly. Tonight, Flotus, the First Lady, and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. Again, President Trump and the First Lady testing positive. This comes after one of his close advisors tested positive for COVID-19.
That's right. Hope Hicks serves as counselor to President Trump and spent time near him this week, including aboard Air Force One. In a Fox News interview earlier tonight, President Trump said that he and the First Lady were being tested. And so far, Hicks is the closest aide to President Trump to test positive for COVID-19.
Huge breaking news this morning. The President of the United States and his wife, Melania Trump, have tested positive for COVID-19.
U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have tested positive for COVID-19. The president made the announcement on Twitter shortly after the news that his top aide, Hope Hicks, had contracted the virus. Hicks traveled with the president several times this week. Trump tweeted that he and his wife would quarantine immediately.
The Lord has come out
Bwana ametoka
with a storm
akiwa na dhoruba
to strike the earth
kuigonga dunia
for their iniquity,
kwa ajili ya udhalimu wao,
for their sin,
kwa ajili ya dhambi yao,
for their blackmail,
kwa ajili ya
for their blasphemy,
kwa ajili ya makufuru yao,
abomination, immorality,
usherati.
Hallelujah,
hallelujah,
kutawaka on that day.
Katika siku hiyo.
I see difficult days ahead of you.
Naona siku zenye utata mwingi mbele zenu.
Come out.
Bwana ametoka
with a storm
akiwa na dhoruba
to strike the earth
kuigonga dunia
for their iniquity,
kwa ajili ya udhalimu wao,
for their sin,
kwa ajili ya dhambi yao,
for their blackmail,
kwa ajili ya
for their blasphemy,
kwa ajili ya makufuru yao,
abomination, immorality,
usherati.
Hallelujah,
hallelujah,
kutawaka on that day.
Katika siku hiyo.
I see difficult days ahead of you.
Naona siku zenye utata mwingi mbele zenu.
The cloud of God is coming from heaven to visit the earth. So this appertains to New Zealand, the United States of America, Europe, everywhere. It's coming to us. The cloud of God is coming. The cloud of God is coming. Europe, Finland, Spain, United States, South America, Concepcion, Chile, all the way to Brisbane, Canberra, to Gisborne, New Zealand, the end of the earth, South Korea, Incheon, Boryong, Busan, Beijing, Shanghai, Fushan. The Lord is coming to town. And yet the Lord is so patient. He gives you time, blessed people, between the announcement today and then, that you may not be afflicted by his coming.